I didn't get to see it because it wasn't my mission. Wasn't something to go visit because it was a high school still at the time, and so they still had classes and whatnot. But I mean, I had a couple of companions that did go there, and it was a school that you left home and you stayed there. You stayed on that campus and you lived there because I mean, obviously my companions weren't from Mexico City, but they went there, so it was, you know, kind of like you had your dorm room and you lived there and you did everything just there. And on the weekends they got to, you know, like Friday night or Saturday, you got to leave the campus and, you know, go have some free time if they want. But it was, everyone that went really loved it. I mean, that had a good experience, very good school, and good friends, and just a good atmosphere of being a church high school. And it was definitely a very positive influence on those students. So yeah, it was very interesting. I don't know how old it is, but I know it was pretty old. But um, I can't think of a negative thing about it. I mean, it's pretty much like it's BYU, except it's a high school version of BYU and it's international. So um, yeah, it's definitely, it was cool, like just to hear about being there. So
What's it called again?
Benemerito. It's kind of like named after Benito Juarez, famous for, I believe this is correct, you know, with helping and with, or a figure of the revolution, their Revolutionary War, so to speak, to gain their independence. I believe that's what it is. He's definitely famous for something like that. So it's kind of named after him. And he also, I'm thinking this is it, but that vision with Wilford Woodruff that he had with the presidents of the United States. Wilford Woodruff, I believe, is who it was, right? When George Washington and these people wanted their work done, and there was one who was not American, was actually of a Mexican descent, and I believe it was him, Benito Juarez, that was there in that vision and wanted his work done too. So very important, very, very important. Not only in Mexican history, but it's also part of church history a little bit. So yeah. So Mexico City has a little chunk of the capital, like the actual capital. It's kind of like its own state. It's kind of weird. There's like the capital, and then there's this state of Mexico, which kind of goes around it. So we got a little chunk of that, which included the temple, Mexico City Temple, and then it went out into the state of Mexico, and it went as low as, I want to say, one of my areas, the zone was called Ixtapaluca, and then we went up a little bit from there. So we went east from Mexico City, and then went back up to the state of Hidalgo, into the capital of Pachuca. And I actually have to serve there too. So that's about the mission boundaries. It's very small, but highly dense. Highly dense. So many people everywhere.
Well,
it was outside our mission always because, I mean, it was always near the mission president, I'm sure, and it was always in the West Mission. Yeah. But as an office elder, I know, like, yeah, they lived outside of the mission boundaries, and them and the assistants were the only ones who would ever drive a car. Like, I mentioned already about not having bikes, so it was always public transportation or on foot. That was it. But office elders, they got to drive, but it was because taking mail or picking up missionaries from the airport, taking them to the airport, or other things like that, going to zone conferences. So, but it was a nice place. I like it. A couple times I've been there, I was like, oh, this is nice. It's really cool. But yeah, I mean, it was just interesting that it was out of the mission. That's because, I mean, yeah, just to be safe. Just those things need to be safe. So passports, visas. So yeah. Like Mexico's like, they're about families, but sometimes they don't take that step of getting actually married sometimes, so it's kind of interesting. And then if they do get married, and then, I found a lot of families, here and there, like maybe there was a single mom with kids, or like there was a family, but, comes from previous marriage, but it's hard to get divorced there, really hard. And it takes a long time. It's interesting. And so as a missionary, had to marry some people. I mean, it wasn't our authority to do it, but we took them down to the office, whatever government office this was, and either they paid for it. I even paid for a few sometimes, because I just like, you want to get baptized, but you have to get married, and you guys don't have much money. Like, I got this. Like, I want to get you guys like baptized, because it's the most amazing thing ever. So you might have to marry some people, take people to get married, because sometimes they just don't take that step. And like, but they want to be together. That's the thing. They just don't take that step sometimes. They're just, or they might do it through like the church, like the Catholic Church, or like something. But in Mexico, it's a little different. There's, the government recognized marriage, which definitely as a church we want that, because you're obeying the law kind of thing. And then there's like the religion is a little bit separate. So it's kind of interesting. Even for sealings, they have to get married first by the government, and then they take that to the temple, and then they get married in the temple. So it's kind of interesting setup there. Whereas here you can, you get married in the temple, and you have someone who can sign off the paperwork and send it in, and it's recognized by the U.S. government. So it's definitely interesting that there's definitely separation in that regard, state and religion in marriage, which was very interesting. So yeah, but be ready to marry people. It's fun, because then they get baptized right after that. The temple is definitely a great one. Very beautiful temple. It's the only temple in Mexico that's big. The rest of the temples were the small ones that President Hinckley, announced when he was president of the church, and built a lot of those and expanded temple work there. Mexico City, though, has one of the big ones. Interesting fact, Mexico City, Moroni has the horn, but he also holds the gold plates. So very cool. And there's a visitor center right there too, so go visit that. And I think there's a zoo there somewhere, but I never went there to visit that. The pyramids, the Teotihuacan pyramids, definitely go. And then also there's this, it's not really an area, but it's kind of in our mission, this church-owned like property. It's like this campground, and it's like all these different activities, and as a mission it's just fun to go to and just play around and stuff. And then there's in Pachuca, there's a great place that goes to the capital of Hidalgo, the state of Hidalgo, and very dense as well. Marketplace there, and just they kind of have like this clock that looks like almost like Big Ben. It's kind of like the same idea, but that's what they have. And they have a kind of also big statue of Christ, kind of like in Brazil almost, and that's a little cool thing to visit. Let's see here. Other than that, a lot of the main Mexico City things, like tourist-wise, is kind of outside of the mission boundaries of Mexico City East. But the president, whoever it was always aware, like, to go visit, the actual capital, the old cathedral, where the president and politics happen, kind of thing. It's called the Zócalo is what it's called. And it's downtown Mexico City. So definitely those are places to visit, but my favorite by far is still Teotihuacan, the pyramids. So yeah. As a missionary, I never really feared for my life in a way. So I wanted to go somewhere, and that's where I went, and I always got there, kind of thing. Some missionaries may have ran into trouble, but it really never happened to me. Very dense, yes, very much so. Traffic is chaos. but it's organized chaos. Like everyone's on the same page somehow, but it freaks me out. Or it did at first, at least. Like, I can't believe we're going this fast and that we're weaving in and out. So it's amazing. Travel wise, as a missionary, we didn't ride bikes, and partly because didn't want to get mugged or stolen or anything, because in everywhere in Mexico there's always some sort of flea market or some sort of market happening sometime during the day, some location, and you can find anything there. And there's this one market, it's notorious in Mexico City, not in my mission, but just everyone knows about it. It's called Tepito. And well, we're not allowed to go there because it's just notorious. But the joke was, you would go in, and especially if you went to a kind of a not so good area and buy something, this vendor would later mug you, take your stuff back, and then they'd sell it again to someone. That kind of idea. So I was like, I think we tried to avoid that kind of thing. So bikes are off limits, probably because of that reason, and because they would sell anything. Even I've seen just random old like kids' toys or little like old TV remotes and just old batteries sometimes, which is interesting. So they're willing to sell anything. So what you carry with you, make sure it's very like nothing flashy, nothing like, well, that's really cool. Like I would own that kind of thing. I would buy that kind of thing. We carried very plain black shoulder bags because just to avoid that. There is a lot of public transportation, a lot of buses, a lot of little vans that you can get in, and didn't really have issues with the public transportation unless it was late at night, which usually didn't happen. So like maybe it happened to a companion of mine while on splits, just little, not in the right mindset, the people that were on the bus maybe, but nothing really serious happened to him, but just like the way that he was approached and whatnot. So it's, just, once it's late at night, just, kind of be where you need to be and your final destination, Taxis too is a big thing. It's taxis everywhere, and be careful of the taxis. I never had an issue, but follow the Spirit more than anything. That is the church term to use, and it sounds cliche, but it is always the answer, and it's always the correct answer. It's because taxis, they can be a fake taxi, but that's really rare to find. But it can happen. It has happened to, no, not missionaries, that has happened to people where they have the taxi and then they pick up other people that they're not, that's not their customer, get in the car with them and pretty much rob them. So, and it's really sad that that happens, but just be careful. Just follow the Spirit, pretty much. I would highly recommend, not as a missionary, to be with someone there, or find someone that'd be the best way to get around, since you wouldn't have to deal with any public transportation of any kind. It's not bad. Just be careful on the time of days and where you're heading. There's a few areas. My mission, Mexico City East, was more the poor side of Mexico City. If you went to the west, very not so. That's where the old church school was, the high school, which is now the MTC in Mexico. Mission presidents all lived in the West Mission because it was safer and everything. East, it was not as much. So just be careful, but don't be afraid, but just be alert. That's what I'd say. Be alert. Family is very big in Mexico. Very together. I've seen places where there's grandma in one room and here's one child and his or her spouse and their kids in the next room, and then there's another family, that's really close together. Really, when there's a family there, like they're really together. Because families, I feel like, is important to a lot of people in Mexico. Very kind, very, very kind and giving, I feel like. And yeah, so it's just, something I really took from them is that every time I walked through the door of a Mexican family's home, always offered something, offered a drink or some food, and just like very giving, even if they weren't interested into what I was sharing at the time, being the gospel of Christ. I was like, I wanted to give you something because that's such a giving people, so very kind, and I really learned from them from that. So Mexico, I think one of the first things I noticed, they celebrate Christmas, but then they celebrate Dia de los Reyes, or Day of the Kings, which is on January 6th. And that's like kind of like the kids' day to get presents kind of things. It's like celebrating the kings going to see Jesus Christ. So I thought that was interesting because in the United States, it's definitely not a holiday at all. But I thought that was interesting. In Mexico, there's that. So your Mexican, the Independence Day, they celebrate just like we celebrate our Independence Day with fireworks and getting together with people and everything. Let's see here. Those are the kind of the main ones I remember. And actually during that Semana Santa, or Holy Week, they really like get into like kind of reenacting what Christ went through during his final weeks of mortality. And I thought that was interesting. It gave it like a live, almost like a live performance. And I thought it was interesting to see. This is, I don't know, like I didn't watch the whole thing because I was doing missionary work, but just to see things here and there as I was walking around, it's very interesting to see that. The church there is pretty strong. It's really there, but historic-wise, the capital's there. The Catholic Church is very strong there. One of the oldest cathedrals is there, and there's a very popular one in the capital. It's not in the mission, but if you need to go shopping for clothes, like you can get permission to go there, and the president will let you also go visit the sites there. And I got to go do that and see this cathedral. It's very beautiful, and it's actually built like on a lake, so like it's constantly sinking, which is kind of interesting that Mexico City was built over that, and so it's just always there sinking. And as far as that, like I don't know too much about the history there, but there was definitely ancient ruins in Mexico City. In my mission, there was pyramids of Teotihuacan, and it was very, very cool experience to go there and see the pyramids. And just when I looked at it, all I could think was Book of Mormon every time I saw it. I mean, you had the sun pyramid, the moon pyramid, and then didn't really say anything about the stars, but it was there. And then when you went to the Quetzalcoatl pyramid, there was the Quetzalcoatl pyramid in the middle, and it was like this kind of like amphitheater, and then raised up there was 12 little pyramids around the side, and on the back there was 3. And I thought that was kind of interesting how that was set up, and I just saw Book of Mormon all over that, and it was really neat to see that, and that there was ancient people there, and the Book of Mormon does testify of that, and it is really, yeah, it was so neat to see that. I'd recommend anyone that goes there and to go see that on a P-Day. Or if you're just going to Mexico City, just to go see that, because it is amazing to see these pyramids. So being in Mexico, the baptismal fonts sometimes don't function all the way. And sometimes you get a lot of cold baptisms. And you just gotta say, man, this water feels great. And just to convince them that, okay, it's going to be okay. And then they get in there. And it says, this is so cold. Why would you have me come in here? But then you baptize them and then everything's okay. One time though, the font just completely failed and we had to fill up the font by hand. And the water got so low that one of the elders actually had to get in the well and like bring up buckets just so we could fill it up. We only got it halfway, but it was that important to baptize. But it's just like one of those things you don't expect, filling up buckets of water and tossing in just to fill up a baptismal font. So it's just, baptismal fonts have issues sometimes in Mexico. It's a little hard in Mexico City just because it's so dense and so like there's not too much like areas that there could be wildlife. Lots of dogs for sure everywhere, just dogs running around. But as far as wildlife, I mean, every once in a while you saw a monkey or, just randomly at someone's place. But nothing really like out of the ordinary. I know like there are places where, you can go hold a tiger, which would be, really cool, right? But because you can't do that here. You can't just go, not like a tiger, but like a baby tiger. That'd be interesting. But but you'd have to find it though. Like there's not like wildlife running around. Although there was interesting, I don't know, it wasn't me, but there was one time going from Mexico City to Pachuca, there's this stretch. Oh wait, that wouldn't be wildlife. More like the circus was in town. This elephant was crossing the freeway. But that's about it. I mean, you have to go find it somewhere where they're being presented or something. Like nothing, I never really encountered anything out of the ordinary or like some sort of snake or big cat of some sort. So yeah, just so many people, like that's what's around. So it's so good. Mexican food is the best thing ever. It's divine, pretty much. I love eating Mexican food. And I have a hard time here coming back to the States trying to find real Mexican food because it's always Mexican-American twist kind of thing. And I'm just like, it's not the same. I don't know what it is, but there's something about Mexican food from Mexican people that makes it amazing. First thing getting there, mission president took us out and was like, taco stand, which was kind of funny. It was just like, oh, we go taco stands. And it was the mission president's favorite. And when I bit into it, I knew why. And from then on, I was sold on this food. And especially the big one is tacos al pastor, which is like a marinated pork. And just normal street tacos, and they got the al pastor in there, and with pineapple, and that was like that mixer. It's a good marriage, I'd say, and I just love it. And tortillas super cheap. I mean, however much a kilogram is, I don't know how to convert that to pounds, but less than $1. I mean, here you spend more than $1 and you get like 12 things of 12 tortillas, and that's it. You get a whole kilogram of tortillas for less than $1 in Mexico, and they're better than the ones here. So they're really good. And so tortillas is a staple. Salsa always, rice, beans, and then some sort of meat, usually chicken, like in the home. Sometimes like a res, which is like beef of some sort. And just the food is great. Just don't be afraid. I was a little skeptical of the seafood. There was some things that did scare me, but other than that, I mean, amazing food. I mean, just get it. Just try what you can because it's a great experience. It's good. And you will be changed forever. You go back to your home and you realize, I miss Mexican food. So it's amazing. Yeah. So I had two mission presidents. First one, President Littlefield, who actually works at the MTC. I learned from him that there are people prepared everywhere to learn about the gospel, and that you really can find more people ready than we think sometimes. And the thing they pulled from was President Hinckley's talk from 1999. I think it's "Find the Lamb, Feed the Sheep" or something. It's something along those lines. And he talked about how, as a church, we have this number of baptisms, but really we can really double that by using the members and being a key part of helping the conversion process. And I really believed that and saw that in the mission, and he really did. Like, number wise, you could see when he started and how it just exploded. Like, how we could see how many people were ready for the gospel, and that just to not give up faith and like finding those people, because there's always somebody, and that's true. Somebody's always ready for the gospel, and a lot of people are willing to accept it. My second mission president, President Bullock, sorry, he taught me about the importance of not only baptizing them, but keeping them in the church. And he really taught me how to be a good husband and a good father. And I learned a lot from him, and how his patience. And I think every time I've seen him here ever since coming to BYU. I've seen him a few times, and every time I see him, there's excitement and love in his eyes for me, and just that he's excited and wants to know how I'm doing, and so just to be a better person. And so I learned, being a good missionary, remembering the church, but also being a good husband and father in the home. So that's the things I really took from them. Oh, let's see here. There's two that I remember. Elder Holland came at the very end, which was kind of funny, but it was amazing. And Elder Tenorio of the 70, he was in the presidency over Mexico. I feel like there was one more, but no, I think those are the two that I was there for. So Elder Tenorio came, and what was neat, Elder Tenorio spoke with the zones. So like, it was the zone I was in with another zone. He went around our mission and did that, and it was really cool to hear him speak. Just his testimony. I feel like the general authorities really open up a lot to the missionaries about experiences they have had, and the sacred ones even sometimes, and this the testimony, how powerful they know Jesus Christ and the gospel. And Elder Tenorio's example of hardworking, because he was born in Mexico and wanted to work in the U.S. for this company, and he talked about how dedicated he was to learning English and being allowed to go there, and learning that language obviously has been a blessing to him. And now, being a general authority, you learn a lot you need to speak English, and especially, there's a lot of English everywhere in the world, so got to be ready to speak to the saints there. So it's just amazing, like, how that prepared him as a general authority to learn the language, and how much work it took him to do that. So just really dedicated person, and just hardworking. It was amazing. And Elder Holland, oh my gosh, he is fired up about missionary work. He loves missionary work, and he just gets really into it and really excited. And I just think about every time when I saw him speak, it was just like, yes, missionary work. We're here to do that. Like, let's go and do the work and baptize everybody we talk to, So, and again, he shared experiences he had, and as a missionary and as an apostle, and following the Spirit, and just things he experienced in his life that prepared him, but focused mainly on being a missionary and working really hard. And just talked about, actually with him, Elder Holland was the presidency of Mexico, so Elder Tenorio actually showed up again, but I don't think he spoke that time. But Elder Scott Grow of the 70, he talked about being a missionary, and how even as a general authority, like, you can never get that same spirit like as a missionary. Like, you're so close to the Spirit as a missionary. So I thought that was really interesting, and how important it is being a missionary, and how much you need the Spirit. So yeah, I every time the general authorities came, I just got a fire inside and just, let's go do it. In my second to last area, Texcoco is what it was called. One of the bigger areas of the mission, but in reality, like compared to a lot of other missions, it's still not. It's just maybe a normal size. I don't know. But this person we taught, her name was Diana, I guess is how you would say it. But we met her through a referral from family members. Actually, technically in our mission, totally different zone, but they had joined the church and they wanted her to hear about it. And she wasn't really interested, a couple times. I think they may have talked to her before, but she wasn't interested. But this time they just sent the referral on and didn't even tell her. I'm just like, visit this person. And we called her, and when we called her, we come later to find out, she's like, I cannot believe that they told them about me, kind of thing. But she just couldn't say no. So she agreed to see us, and found where she was. We found her home. That was the most important part, because it's hard to find addresses sometimes. Sometimes there's not a lot of organization of addresses, and sometimes it just doesn't make sense. So you have to go find it. So that's what we did, and we actually found it pretty fast. And so we were early. It's like, okay, we're early. We'll come back when it's time. And apparently she saw us, so she ran out and was like, oh, you guys, so and so. And like, yeah, we're Elder Rubio and I think it was Elder Posada. That's who it was at the time, and invited us in, even though we were early. And the timing was very perfect. Couldn't have been more prepared at this moment. She was going through a difficult situation. The husband wanted to leave the family and wanted to get divorced, and going through that. And they have 2 kids at that time, and it was just really rough stuff she was going through. And the referral couldn't have come at any better time to be there to help her through that process. And I think part of that, softened her heart to listen. And we taught her, and her son were baptized. The little one wasn't quite the age, so we couldn't baptize her, but we definitely got her and her son baptized, and they were really excited and everything. Hardships still continued, but had the gospel. One particular was getting a job for her, because they had a gym, just kind of like, it's like, oh, you guys own a gym, that's kind of cool. But they were splitting up, so she wasn't going to have the gym anymore. So she had to get a job, and she was doing little things here and there, and just what she could. And we were visiting her one day, and at this point, I think I'd switched companions, so she had been around for a while. So she's like, I talked about financial hardships, and I have this money, and I'm just not sure what to do. And there's talk about tithing and what to do with that, and I just have this choice between paying tithing or having money for my kids and feeding them and everything. And it's a difficult situation to be put in as a missionary, maybe, or whoever you are. It's just like, how do you advise them? But because of the gospel, because of the knowledge we had as elders and missionaries, and just had to go tell her what is right in the gospel, that the Lord's always first, and to always pay the Lord first, then pay yourself, and then and we went with that, and we bore our testimony that everything will work out with the Lord. If you do this, it will. And of course it did. She got a call. She paid her tithing that Sunday. That week she got a call from a friend from high school. She's an older lady. She's got 2 kids already. She's not old. She was, didn't mean it like that. Definitely in her 30s, maybe like early 40s, maybe, but I don't think so. So it's been a while, and she's like, I thought of you this day, and thought of you, and I'm looking for someone to help me with this, whatever job it was. I don't remember what, but more stable, better paying. Got the job, take care of her family. And it's just right there, I mean, who would have thought, someone from years and years ago all of a sudden think of you and say, oh, I want to give you a job. That doesn't happen. You can call it coincidence as much as you want. It really wasn't. She obeyed the law of tithing, and the Lord came through, because he always does, when not just the law of tithing, with any law of the gospel, but the Lord first, and he takes care of you and gets you through any hardship. And putting the Lord first, doesn't matter what you're going through, it always ends up being okay. So that was definitely a huge lesson, big miracle from that story, from her and her faith. I mean, I've never had that situation where I had to choose between feeding myself or my family or paying tithing. But I know because of that, I've always paid tithing, even as we got married. My wife and I got married and moved to Utah so I could come to BYU. I mean, didn't have jobs yet. We got the first job, and it wouldn't cover even rent if we just had this job. Paid the tithing anyways, and we got taken, and the Lord provided everything else. So it's just one of the things. Yeah, tithing's a true law. Going to Mexico City, definitely an eye opener. Realizing, there are people in all sorts of situations, poverty almost sometimes, and even poverty. Being a missionary, encountering that, you realize the blessings of the gospel, and how even in those situations the Lord's aware of his people and of his children, and he wants to take care of them. And the people are the most kind that you would find, and learning from them, their kindness, made me realize how important, not important, how unimportant material things can be. And there's really happiness in the gospel, even when you have practically nothing. The people of Mexico are very ready to receive the gospel, because they are the descendants of the Lamanites in the Book of Mormon. And so the prophecy is true that they will blossom as a rose. I mean, that's really true. And so be ready to work hard, because there's a lot of people everywhere on the street. Every day walking on the street, there's people to talk to and share the gospel. And you will find lots of people to teach, and they will join the church. There are lots of people willing to get baptized. You just got to do it, pretty much. And because of that, you'll see the gospel, how the gospel changes lives. And don't miss a beat to talk to somebody, because there's always someone available to talk to on the street, just to invite them to listen to the gospel. And a lot of them will, and even tell you where they live, exactly where they live, and they will get baptized and live faithfully in the church. So just be there for that, help them through that process. That's, I think, what I would say. Just work hard, talk to people, everybody.
I remember I was surprised, even on the flight to Mexico, I was surprised by the friendliness of the Mexican people. The missionaries in my district and I, we were all lined up in the same row of the airplane, and we were talking and chatting and just laughing away. And a group of Mexicans behind us were sitting there listening. We were pretty loud, so it's pretty easy to hear our conversation. And all of a sudden, like a couple, I think a lady and her husband behind us just started, coming in and joking around with some of the things that we were saying. And it surprised me they were so open and friendly that they could just, walk into a conversation like that so comfortably and just be so pleasant and kind and funny at the same time. It was pretty impressive to me. Like, I don't think I would have. That rarely ever happened in the U.S. before my mission, and so I was pretty impressed by that. And then also, as we were flying into Mexico City, as you could see the city on the horizon. We had passed several cities, obviously, but we knew that one was Mexico City because of the giant brown cloud of smog that covered it. That was, that was hovered over it for hundreds of miles. That was the first time I'd ever seen so much pollution in my life, coming from a small town. And so we knew we had gotten to Mexico City when we had done that. We could even smell the smog coming in through the airplane vents, ventilation system. That was pretty impressive. And the city itself was incredible. I'd been to St. Louis and Chicago, which are pretty massive cities, but Mexico City took the cake by far. It was just this. The entire city was just spread out over incredible distances and just kind of ran over this valley and then up the sides of the mountains and over the mountains and in between them. And it was just incredible to see how big the city was. It went on almost forever. Like, we couldn't even see the end of it. It was just an incredibly large city. Even from as high up as we were, we couldn't really see the end of it. And I found out later that it's not just Mexico City, the federal district, but the federal district kind of bled into other cities, and now almost the entire state of Mexico is one giant city, which is pretty incredible. It's just a phenomenal sight, just to see so many houses so close together, just like a plain of cement ivy covering everything. That was kind of neat. And then, let's see, other first memories of Mexico. Getting into the airport was kind of nerve-wracking, exciting, but a little nerve-wracking the first time, where we were no longer with English speakers. It was just pure Spanish speakers, and trying to work our way through that was an interesting challenge. And then right after that, we were picked up by the mission secretaries and assistants to the president, taken to the temple, where the temple compound has the Mexico MTC, the temple, and a stake center and a visitor center all in one city block roughly. And so that's where we had all of our mission conferences and other meetings and transfers. And so it was really nice to get to go and visit the temple every few months for those events. And so that's where they took us for the first transfer meeting. And we had gotten delayed because we were waiting for visas. And so that first transfer meeting there, it wasn't a true transfer meeting, because there was only us and then our future companions there. So there was about 12 of us, or about 8 of us, and then about eight other Mexicans there who were going to be our trainers. And so it was just this tiny little quiet transfer meeting, which was totally different from every other transfer meeting, but it kind of set what I thought as the precedent of a transfer meeting. And so we met our companions there. The mission president gave a quick speech and devotional, just expressed his love for us. And we met up with our companions and got our rides back to our respective areas, and that was interesting. That the first time speaking with my companion, I was surprised by how much I could understand after coming out of the MTC. To be honest, I was not expecting to be able to understand anything at all, and it was really hard. Definitely a struggle. I had a mental struggle trying to pick out the words that he was saying, but it was a very exhilarating challenge to just see how far I'd come from not understanding anything in Spanish to being able to pick out at least 50 or 60% of what was going on. That was a very satisfying feeling. And we also went to the mission president home before the transfer meeting and spent the night there, and he took us out for dinner. And I remember the first time I ate Mexican food, I was just blown out of the water. I could not believe how different it was from from the Mexican food that we get here in the U.S. It was, I'd never even imagined that such food existed. It was pretty interesting, very delicious as well. I remember specifically the Jamaica, if you've ever heard of that. It's a drink made from the hibiscus flower, and it's delicious. It's still one of my favorites to this day. And that was the first time I'd ever seen that. And I think I was just so surprised at how many different things and varieties of food and culture that we didn't have in the U.S. I'd always heard of how the U.S. was this giant cultural melting pot where many cultures from around the world came and kind of mixed together. And so I expected, that I kind of already knew, if not everything, at least a lot about the cultures of the world, But that was something I totally had not expected, to see so many things I've never even imagined or heard of before. And that was very exhilarating and fun as well. Preparing for the mission, I think it's a lot more than what most people and what I, expected at first. I think before the mission, a lot of us pre-missionaries think that it means, becoming more familiar with the scriptures to get to know it better, and preparing financially, saving up enough money to pay for your mission. But even more importantly, I think, and this is the part I didn't understand, is that preparing for mission means developing the character traits necessary to be an amazing missionary and not just a mediocre one, in my opinion, or at least a more successful missionary, a more capable missionary. And granted, you learn a lot of those abilities on the mission and a lot of those skills and character traits, but I think the more you learn beforehand, the more God can teach you while you're on the mission. So it's an even better opportunity that way. So in preparing for a mission, I'd say some of the biggest things for me were developing discipline, because a mission is not an easy experience by any stretch of the imagination. It requires consistent, diligent, and long-term commitment and effort throughout the entire 2 years, and that can be really, really hard, especially for kids our age, kids of mission age. And so I think for me, one of the biggest things that helped me develop discipline on the before the mission was just being dedicated to everything I did. Whether it was extracurricular activities, work, home responsibilities, school. I worked several different jobs throughout my high school years, and that kind of gave me a lot. Some of them were much harder than others, and that helped me develop a good work ethic and a lot of consistency. And on top of that, I think it requires a spiritual discipline, not just a work ethic, but being able to do the right things, even no matter how hard they are. And simple examples of that you can use to prepare are just studying your scriptures every day, no matter how tired you are, or how busy you are, and just learning to keep your commitments and follow up on your word and keep your promises no matter what. That's a huge way that you can help develop those character traits beforehand. I think another important character trait to develop is love, because missionary work is love, and without it you can't really do true missionary work. It's very difficult to do that, I think. And so just learning beforehand to love people regardless of who they are, regardless of what they do, and to really have a sincere desire for their well-being. That's an extremely important part of preparing to be a missionary. And then other characteristic traits that I think would help a bunch are just developing your knowledge and wisdom, and knowing how to tackle and confront the problems that you run into as a missionary, which are many, as you can attest to yourself as well. I think that was something that I didn't really prepare for very well before my mission. I wish I had done better. I wish I had known how to prepare for that beforehand. I think if I were to go back and do it again, I think I would take some time to teach people, because that's really the way I learned it on the mission, was by running into the problems and then just stewing about them forever, trying to figure out how to solve those problems. And so I would suggest for anybody preparing to serve a mission to either go out and teach with the missionaries, or just as a member missionary, find one of your friends who's interested in the gospel and teach them as much as you know and as much as you can about the gospel. And in doing those things, you'll run into the typical issues that a missionary runs into every day, and that'll help you start thinking critically about how to solve those issues. So whenever you get out in the mission field, you'll already have started on that learning curve, and it won't take you as much time to develop the know-how or the skills in order to do that. I felt like that was one thing I struggled with a lot as a missionary that was frustrating to me at the time, was that every few months I learned something new and about how to be a better missionary and how to be a better teacher, and I would look back and think, man, if I wish I'd known that earlier, I've basically been wasting several months of my time. And that's how I looked at it then. And that wasn't the case necessarily, but I definitely could have been using my time even more wisely and even more effectively if I had known those things before. And so I think that anything you can do to learn those abilities and skills beforehand will help you have a much more enjoyable mission, for one thing, and help you be better equipped to help the people that you're serving in the mission field. I remember hearing a story. I couldn't tell you in detail all of it, but it was about the first few missionaries that went to Mexico, and their experience was incredible. They went through so much danger, and they nearly were killed several times. They were arrested, and they were scheduled for execution either at least once or twice. I can't remember all the details, but they were miraculously saved by individuals coming to their aid who were not even members of our church, but just a set of very curious circumstances led to them being saved, and they were actually taken before the president of Mexico at the time, and they were brought in there because they had no idea how to deal with these missionaries, because it was the first time they'd ever been seen in Mexico, and so the president just sat down and started to interrogate them, and he asked them, what they were there for, and started asking them a lot of pointed, difficult and somewhat offensive questions. And it was impressive to me because the missionaries, instead of just kind of cowering before the authority and trying to appease him in order to gain his favor, in order to continue preaching in the city or in the country. They just taught what they were sent there to teach, and they bore their testimony. And the effect of it was so powerful on the president that he let them go without any sort of citation or consequences whatsoever, and gave them free ability to continue to preach in the country. And that's that I couldn't do the story justice. It was a very incredible story, but if I would suggest anyone look it up who's interested in it, because it was to me it was a very touching and very inspiring story as well. And then I understand that the missionary work in Mexico City was paused for a while during the Mexican, I think it was the Mexican Revolution, as the circumstances in the country became increasingly dangerous. Missionaries were pulled out, and they were not allowed to go back in until things calmed down. And then a little bit, and then even later than that, I think it was in the early 1900s, but I can't remember exactly, like around the 1920s or so. I'm not exactly positive on that. But since then, the church has been growing very, very steadily and very well in Mexico. The Mexican people are full of faith. It never ceases to astound me how faithful and how dedicated and how believing those people are. They really have a strong belief in deity, and many of them are just so dedicated and so faithful to whatever it is that they're believing in. That was very impressive to me, especially coming from the U.S., where, and in typical Western culture, we're growing much more distant from religious fervor than we ever have been in the past, and it was really refreshing to see that continual faith in Mexico. From what I understand, the two fastest growing religions in Mexico are the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints and the Jehovah's Witness Church. They still, even though they're growing extremely rapidly, they still comprise a very, very, very small percentage of the population. But even despite the small number that we have in Mexico, it's still one of the most heavily populated countries with members in the world. You can go pretty much just a couple miles and see a chapel for our church. It's pretty astounding. Of course, the cities are a lot more condensed than the cities here in Utah, but the chapels are about as consistently spaced, which I found quite interesting. It's kind of it's growing into its own Zion, which I find very, very hopeful and very very inspiring. If I remember correctly, there were 15 temples in Mexico when I started my mission, and there might be even more now. So that's a larger number than I think are in almost any other country in the world other than the U.S. So Mexico is a very important area for the church right now, and it has been for the last several years. Along kind of the same lines as the symbolism of the flag, there's also they call it the Palace of Fine Arts in Mexico City, which is built for them by the French, and they incorporated a lot of the Aztec culture and symbols into this fine arts building when they built it. And so, apart from being just a beautiful structure, it also has a lot of symbolic meaning that goes along with the same symbolism as of the flag. And from the history major that gave me a tour of the place, from what he said, he explained to me that we look at the eagle on the Mexican flag with the snake in its jaws and in its claws and think that it's eating the snake, but in reality the eagle is just picking the snake up and carrying it up to heaven. And it's a symbol and for the ascension of man into heaven. And the eagle is supposed to represent God or deity, whereas the snake represents mankind, which are kind of we're incapable of flight, and so we're kind of doomed to walk the earth, and that's a symbol for mortal life. So snake is a symbol for mortal man, and the eagle, which is capable of flight in the heavens, is symbolic of God. And so it's interesting to find. It's interesting to think about the deeper symbolism then of the feathered serpent, or Quetzalcoatl of the Mexican historic theology as well, because the feathered serpent is a mix between the snake and the eagle, or in other words, it's a mix between God and man. It's a man who is also God, and as a lot of historians, believe Quetzalcoatl is a symbol for Jesus Christ, who was a man who came to earth as a mortal, but was also God. He was the Son of God who had come here on earth, and in order to make it possible for the snakes or the mortal man to become like eagles and to soar the heavens. And so I think that's a beautiful symbol of the Savior and his mission here on earth as well. And that was really powerful for me to see that, and just how it all kind of like like how it was all interconnected in the symbolisms. And in the Palace of Fine Arts, they take that symbolism even farther, and they have a lot of the artwork is made up of snakes with the faces of men coming out of them, and it's kind of a symbol of how fallen mortal man can grow into his potential and become, what a true man is meant to be, what a true human is meant to be. And I thought that was a really beautiful symbol as well. If I remember the story correctly, you'll recognize on the Mexican flag there's the picture of the eagle and the snake and the cactus. And the story of that was that there was a native people to Mexico, native Mexican people that were traveling from another country. They had to leave their home for some reason, and they were searching for a new place to settle. And they had a prophet among their people who said that they would see a sign of an eagle carrying a snake from a cactus whenever they arrived there. And that's exactly what happened. According to the story, these people are migrating, and they come to the Mexico City Valley on the side of the lake, and they see a cactus, and on the cactus there's an eagle with a snake in its claws, and it takes flight, and that's how they know where to found the city. And after they founded the city, they named it, if I remember correctly, they named it Tenochtitlan, which was the original name of Mexico City. And in that native tongue, from what I've heard, it means City of the Messiah, or the Promised Land. Or sorry, it means the Promised Land. And the people of Mexica, which is the ancient version of the name of Mexico, it actually means people of the Messiah. So it was the people of the Messiah in the Promised Land, which I found fascinating. And there might be different translations or different historical origins of those names and things, but from the people I talked to in Mexico that studied history, that's what they had told me, which I found very, very fascinating. Especially given the history of the Book of Mormon and things. In our mission, there was the city of Teotihuacan, which is famous for the pyramids that they have there. And within the temple compound where the temples of Teotihuacan were built, there were two main large pyramids, and then, if I remember correctly, there was at least, and there's the Temple of the Sun and the Temple of the Moon, and within the Temple of the Sun district, there's 12 more pyramids, and then there's also the Temple of Quetzalcoatl, and then in the Temple of the Moon district, there's several more pyramids, but I can't remember, smaller pyramids, but I can't remember how many more there are. And it was very interesting because in the Temple of the Sun district, it's surrounded by 12 pyramids, which I find significant because of the 12 tribes of Israel and the 12 apostles. And not only that, but because in the center of the compound, at the lowest section, so the compound consists basically of the Pyramid of the Sun at the far end, rising high above everything else, and then a ridge around the outside that surrounds everything, kind of like a giant bowl made of the 12 smaller pyramids. And in the middle, it's kind of like a small valley. At the center of the small valley is a further indentation that they created, the historic site labels that section in the very center of the valley, where it's even more indented, as the pila, which is Spanish for like font or pool, which is the same word that we use in our church for the font where we baptize people. Which for LDS members can have a lot of significance in that our temples have baptismal fonts, and the ancient temples of Mexico City also have baptismal fonts in the lowest sections of the temple, which I find to be extremely significant as well. And the fact that there's 3 pyramids can also be significant in representing the Godhead. Specifically, that one, the Temple of Quetzalcoatl, could be tied into Jesus Christ being one of the members of the Godhead, as Quetzalcoatl is often considered a symbol of him. And that temple itself was just quite beautiful, just to see that they had all these just different correlations and to the Judeo-Christian faith. I thought that was pretty fascinating, and even and especially they correlated so much to the current faith of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And so that was extremely fascinating. And they have a museum there of relics that they've extracted from the archaeological sites of that temple, and a lot of those also appeared to have a lot of relation or correlation to the ordinances we do in current LDS temples. And I won't go into detail about that, of course, but there's quite a possibility for connections there as well. So that was a pretty interesting place for me to visit. One of the interesting, how should I say this? aspects of dealing with Mexico City life was learning about the taxi system. Because in Mexico City, it's quite often that you will hail a taxi and they'll just whip right by you and kind of like wave at you, like not even stop. They'll totally acknowledge you, but they won't stop. And it took me forever to figure out that that's because Mexico City is so big that they divide it into taxi districts. And a taxi is only allowed to pick up customers within that district in order to not take business from the other taxi men in that district. And so you have to start to memorize every taxi district. The taxis from every district have their own paint job or color scheme or car style, and so you just have to start memorizing which car style is the one from the district you're in, and start to flag down those taxis if you want to get a ride. So that was kind of an interesting aspect of Mexico City life as well. In Mexico City, in the very center, the center plaza, they have a cathedral that you can visit and an old Aztec temple, the ruins of an old Aztec temple that you can that you can visit. And that was really neat to see something so ancient and so old that was still intact that they had unearthed, and just to learn more about the culture of the people that lived in that time. And interestingly enough, the temple was destroyed, but the stones that had been used to build that Aztec temple had actually been used to construct the cathedral that stands next to it nowadays. And so you can even see they have a section of the cathedral that's that they have left unrestored, kind of in its older condition, so where you can see the actual stones that were used from the old temple to build the new cathedral. And the cathedral itself is a beautiful structure, just enormous and so grandiose, so majestic and breathtaking, and with lots of artwork all over it, and on the outside, and sculptures and paintings of all sorts and kinds. And I thought that was fascinating. Coming from a small town in Illinois, I had not been exposed to very much culture in my life, and so that was a very exciting experience for me, to see all those sites and historical monuments and things. It's built on a lake, literally. And you might have heard this, but back when they first started building the city, they wanted to expand, and so they would build these. They'd build like these floating lots out of different materials, or they would just dump different kinds of rubble and rock and other things into the lake to create more solid space on which to build houses and markets and things like that. And over time, that grew to cover the entire lake. And so the city is literally built on top of a lake. And one of the interesting facts about, or consequences of that, is that over the years, the city slowly sinks lower and lower into the ground, and they have an underground lake which they can pull their water from. And so it's not uncommon to be walking down the streets in Mexico and see a house that's like 6 feet sunk into the ground, on the side of the road, and you have to kind of like stoop and slide into the front door, or they just build another door on the next story up, because it's sunk down so low over the years. I thought that was a pretty interesting fact. Well, food in Mexico is always an adventure. I had so much fun trying different kinds of food there. I had made a commitment to myself at the very beginning of my mission that I was never going to say no to anything that was offered me unless it was against the commandments. And so that opened up a whole lot of possibilities being in Mexico, especially in one of my areas in Pachuca, Hidalgo. The area is a desert, very, very, very barren in a lot of ways, and so the people have always kind of resorted to eating a lot of different things that most people would not eat under normal circumstances, but they've become traditional foods there. And one of those things was fried crickets, and that's pretty common now. And I remember I think it was my first week in that area. We went to visit a member, and he asked me if I was hungry, and I said, "Oh, I'm all right. I could have a snack." He's like, "Oh, I'll get you a snack." And so he brings out a plate with 2 tortillas and sets down a bottle of salsa next to it, and then he takes this bowl. And it's a bowl about this big, and it's full of fried crickets, and he just dumps it on the plate. And he says, "All right, Elder, have at." And so this is literally about like a pound of fried crickets that I'm looking at here. And I ate all of them, every single one of them, because he was a very fun member, and he really liked to have fun with the missionaries, and so he would push us to see how much he could get us to do, and so I went along with it and ate the entire bowl of fried crickets. that was I got over most inhibitions I had right there. So that was entertaining. And then in that same area, we developed a tradition as a district of going out to eating tacos every so often at the different taco restaurants that there were. And one of our favorites ones was right next to the steak center, and it was kind of like a motorhome or a bus that had been gutted and turned into like a restaurant, and then they would just pull it up next to the steak center and serve tacos there each night. And some of the tacos well, one style of tacos that they had were cow eyeball tacos, and so they would take the cow eyes and deep fry them in cow oil or whatever, and then and then put them on the tacos, and that was a major step forward in, in overcoming my inhibitions. I did it, you know, I was kind of afraid of what they would taste like. It was extremely weird, but it turned out they actually tasted really, really good. They had a lot of flavor, and the texture was about what you'd expect. Very soft and squishy, kind of like some, you know, natural gushers, and with the juice inside. that was very fun. Other traditional dishes of Mexico are they eat a lot of chili. Obviously, I think most people know that. And one of the things they would do is it was like a garnish that you could put on top of your tacos or burritos or whatever it was you were eating, and it was just pretty much slices of habanero pepper, onions, and lime juice, and I think that was about it. And so you just, you know, scoop up the lime juice, habaneros, and onions, and just put them on whatever it was you're eating. And that was extremely spicy. I'd never had my tongue burn so bad up until that point, until I tried some of that. But I ended up developing a huge taste for that, and I came to love it a lot. Despite how much it burned, it was just so tasty, so good. And let's see, another very common food in Mexico are what they called carnitas, which is kind of loosely translated as like little meaties. And it's a booth that they set up every weekend or so. And what they'll do is a family will butcher a pig and throw the pig into a giant vat of pig oil and deep fry the entire thing. And then you'll come along and say which part of the pig you want, and they'll just, like, you know, fish it out of the vat of burning oil, and then chop it up and put it on a taco for you. And so you can ask for any part of the pig that you can imagine: skin, arteries, heart, tongue. One of my favorite parts was the spleen. That actually has a really, really good flavor. And so you just pick any part of the pig and they'll butcher it up for you. Pig intestines also are delicious. That's one of the things I miss most about Mexican food, I think, is pig intestine tacos. That was one of my favorites. And very commonly eaten food in Mexico. I recall one time I asked for an assorted taco where they just pulled a bunch of things out randomly and butchered and you know, chopped it up in my taco. And so I found all sorts of things from tongue, calf meat, like, you know, from like the leg meat, like cut up arteries with like the atherosclerotic plaques filling the entire thing, and slices of skin and ear and all sorts of things, and cartilage from the pig hooves as well. You can just, and it's all edible. Like, they all eat it, and it all tastes great. So they're very thrifty, and they make use of all their resources in Mexico. And let's see, I think also in Pachuca, in the desert place where I was at for a while, that was where they had some of the most interesting foods. One of the common delicacies of the area is a caterpillar called chiniquili is what they call it. And it's a caterpillar that lives in the roots of the giant maguey plants that are kind of like a giant aloe vera plant. And so when it rains, the caterpillars will come out of the soil in order not to drown, and the people will collect them and eat them, like boil them in a salsa and make a delicacy out of it. And it's extremely expensive. I never had a chance to try it because they only come into season at certain times of the year, and it costs quite a bit to eat them. So I never had the chance to try those. But I've heard they're delicious, and everybody loves them there. And then another thing that's pretty common as well is what they call escamoles, which is fried ant eggs. And we got to try those firsthand out of the ground one time when we were visiting. We were teaching a family who lived up in the desert, and they had, financially, their means were very humble economically, and so they often would go out into the desert to forage for food. And so one day we go to teach them, and we knock on the door, and the little boy comes out, and we asked if his parents were home, and he said, "Oh, they're out looking for food in the desert." And so we offered to help him and asked what they were looking for. And he said, "Well, we're looking for palm flowers, cactus fruits, and ant eggs." And he said, "Okay, what do you want us to help with?" And he said, "You guys can go find the ant eggs." And so he handed us a crowbar, or like a piece of rebar and a shovel, and he said, "Go find the ant hills and dig up the ant eggs and put them in a container and bring them back here." And so my companion and I were really excited, and we took off. And the ant hills in Mexico are about this tall, about 1.5 feet or so, and just full of ants. And there's two kinds of ants in Mexico that I saw. There's the black ants and then the red ants. And in this part of the state, the more common type of ants that you were finding were the red ants, and they would bite or sting or whatever it was that they did, and it would burn really bad. And that happened to be the majority of the ants that we found. And so we would go hunting these ant eggs, and we'd go. So we get to an ant hill, and we got to the point where we just we didn't bother messing around with the ants at all. We just decided to knock down the entire ant hill until we found the little pouch where they would keep the eggs, and then one person would distract the ants by running around in circles, while the other person would run in and pick them up. And so one person would take the shovel and just like cut down the ant hill and spread it over the ground until we found where the ant eggs were. And it was amazing how coordinated and how intelligent the ants were. Like this, you could just walk around the anthill the entire time and they'd never bother you. But the second you touched their anthill, the entire swarm, the entire horde would swarm out of the den and just start coming in one wave towards you. And no matter what you did, they would follow you. So you could jump over them and they would like turn around and like just keep going at you. And they were fast and relentless, and so we had to keep moving and jumping around and hopping between them and trying not to step on them, because if you stepped on them, they would climb up your shoes and then onto your pants and start stinging you. And so it was just a constant battle not to get stung by these ants. And so we'd gotten about 8 of these different ant hills demolished and harvested in about an hour and a half or so. And we took them back to the family, and we showed our little catch. And the ant eggs are these like tiny white larvae, about 3/4 of an inch long or so in the early stages, and as they mature, they start to condense kind of into the form of an actual ant, only just pure white and still, like they don't move at all. And so we had anywhere from the perfect smooth looking larva to like the fully formed ant that was still white. We brought them back to the family, and the mom and dad had gotten back by that time, so the wife took one to sample, and she's like, "Oh, these are bitter. What kind of ants did you harvest these from?" And we said, "Oh, the ants that are around here." And she's like, "The black ones or the red ones?" We said, "Oh, the red ones." And she said, "Oh, the only ones that you're really supposed to eat are the black ant eggs." And so we had spent an hour and a half harvesting these ants and getting stung by them, and we ended up getting the wrong kind at the end. And so she said, "Well, if you guys want them, you can have them. Like, we won't use them." And so, I was game. So we washed them up and just took some handfuls and popped them in our mouth and ate them. And they didn't taste bad at all. They were kind of watery. Some of them were crunchy, but they weren't particularly sweet like the other ones were supposed to be. But they weren't bad by any means. And so that was a very fun experience. But I think the food item that takes the cake out of everything I ate in Mexico. I'll just tell a story. We were visiting a lady that we were teaching, and her brother was home for lunch at the time, and he pulls out his lunchbox while we were teaching his sister, and he pulls out this little tiny sandwich bag, and he kind of looks down at it, and he looks over at us. And he stands up and walks over to us, and I thought, he's gonna offer something. And so I was, just waiting for him to extend the invitation. And so he says, "Hey, elders, you want to try some of these?" And he holds this bag out right in front of my face, and all I can see are these long black wriggling legs, like just going back and forth. And I was like, "Whoa, what is that?" And I took a closer look, and they were live beetles. They were about this long, and about an inch and a half or so, and pretty thick, about half an inch thick, all the way around. And they were black with 2 or 3 orange stripes along their back, and they were still alive and kicking. And I said, "Like, you eat these alive?" And he said, "Yep." And I said, "Holy cow!" I knew right then, as soon as he was offering them to me, I knew I was going to have to try them, because I made that vow to myself, never say no to anything. But I really, really did not want to eat a live beetle, and so I just stared at it and trying to get up the courage to say yes. And he said, "Here, take one." And so I picked one up, and as I picked it up, it started wriggling even more. And my companion, he also convinced my companion to try one too. And so my companion picks up and throws it in a vat of guacamole, just stirs it around, and he picks up just a giant spoonful of guacamole with the bug in it, and takes it and just crunches it and downs it really fast. And I didn't want to add the guacamole. I wanted the full flavor experience of whatever it was that I was trying, and whatever this bug was going to taste like. And so I just held it there for like a good solid. It seemed like forever, but it was probably only like a minute and a half, and just trying to get up the courage to put it in my mouth. And I eventually resolved that I was going to just throw it in there and bite down on the head as hard and as fast as I could and kill it so it stopped wriggling. And so I throw it in my mouth and bite down really hard and just like crunch it. And as anybody who's ever, messed with bugs or killed bugs as a child knows, they don't die when you rip the head off. And so I bit the head, and the bug just kept wriggling even more fiercely and inside my mouth. And so I just like bit down even harder, and it exploded in this juicy mess on the inside of my mouth. And oh, that was I will never forget that. That was quite the experience. So once I got past, the bug guts splattering the inside of my mouth, I kind of, slurped them down and then started crunching on it to get into, a form that I could swallow and not get, my throat all scratched up. Eventually the bug died, and it was interesting. I was really surprised actually, because the inside of the bug, the juices tasted somewhat like pistachio pudding, but more liquidy, and so it didn't taste bad at all. And then as I crunched on the legs, they tasted kind of like pecans, but with a little bit harder texture, and so it wasn't a bad flavor at all. And I was quite surprised. And I think after that, I've pretty much overcome any inhibitions I will ever have about eating any sort of food, because I think that. I cannot think of anything that would be worse to eat than that. But yeah. So there's one more story, and again, it happened in this same area. The area was the little city was called Takamak, where we were living at the time, and again, as I mentioned before, it was an extremely difficult area. People were not very receptive to us at all. And there's one specific time when we went probably several weeks without finding anybody that really wanted to hear our message, and we just had met dead ends everywhere every time we set appointments. So we set appointments and did anything, and so we were getting very discouraged and looking for new ways to find people. And so we tried everything we could think of. We even there were several grade schools in the area, and whenever the grade schools would get out, all the moms would come rushing over to pick up their kids and go home. There was this massive gathering of people at those times, and so we decided that to reach more people, we were going to start going and talking to the moms as they were going to and from the schools to pick up their kids, and that met with horrible success, no success whatsoever. And we tried all sorts of new things for several weeks, and nothing was working. And but we kept trying everything we knew how to do until we thought of something new. And so while we were doing this, while we were going to talk to these moms of the children while they were going to and from the schools. We did that every day, sometimes twice a day, because they have school at 2 different times in Mexico, sometimes twice a day for a couple weeks without meeting anybody who was even remotely interested in our message at all. And one day, it was about the second time of the day that we had done it. We had talked to so many people and just gotten emphatically rejected numerous times, just within the last 30 minutes. And we were walking away from the school, and just kind of, I was suffering emotionally this time. I was just so discouraged, so unmotivated, and just not sure how to continue. And as I was walking away from the school, another mom turns the corner with her stroller, heading to pick up her kids, and I thought I should talk to her, but all the memories of the last 40 or 50 rejections in the last hour came back to me, and I just thought I don't really want to deal with that right now, and so I walked right by her, and then as I walked by her, I felt this feeling stop me and say, go back and talk to her. And I said, no, I just talked to 50 or 60 other women. I don't really, that rejected me. I don't really feel like going back and doing that again right now. I'll just go on and find somebody else. And again, I felt the feeling, go back and talk to her. And so I turned around and walked back, tapped the lady on the shoulder, and she turned around, and I introduced myself as a missionary, and I explained to her why my companion and I were there to share a message about Jesus Christ with her, and asked if she wanted to hear it. And surprisingly, she was receptive, which is the first time that happened in weeks. And so we set an appointment, and I went back to her house, and a few days later, when we went back to teach her, she said, it's really great that you guys found me. I had been on vacation with some friends about 6 months ago at least, in another state of Mexico, and they were members of your church, and they had taken me to church with them while I was staying with them, and I loved it so much that when I came back here, I wanted to find it, but I searched everywhere and couldn't find the church. And so just the night before you guys talked to me, I kneeled down and prayed to Heavenly Father that He would help me find your church. And that was the day later you contacted me, and so we were able to teach her and her family and baptize them into the church, and that was a beautiful experience. And I just felt after that experience, I just felt so grateful to God. I felt kind of like the children of Lehi and his family after traveling through the desert and finally finding the promised land. I think it was Lehi and Nephi just knelt down on the ground and just praised God for a long time. And I felt like doing this. I just felt just like them at that time. I just wanted to walk out somewhere and just kneel down and praise God for everything He had done for me and for His generosity and kindness to us after such a long time of difficulty. And that was just a very, very touching experience to me. Well, any missionary can tell you how hard it is to get the members involved in the missionary work. And so as a missionary, I remember thinking, wow, I was a totally useless member. I'd like nothing to further the work, you know. And I made a commitment afterwards that that when I went back, I would be a much better member missionary. And I wished so much that I had done that before the mission. I just saw, you know, like all those years of you know, of being friends with people and knowing and interacting with people on such a daily basis, that I had so many opportunities to help people and share the gospel with them that I kind of just wasted. And that was extremely painful and to me, and it was something I regretted a lot. And so if there's one thing I would suggest to anybody before the mission is really take the time now to do the missionary work, because otherwise you'll get to the point when you look back and wish you had used those moments, you know, to do that. It can be such a rewarding experience, and so much good can come with that. I remember when I was on my mission and I realized this, I wrote back to my family members and I was like, I've realized now, you know, how important it is to be a member missionary, and how much the missionaries really rely on you to do the missionary work. And so I invited them very heavily to get involved in the missionary work. And when they did, amazing things happened. About 3 or 4, just that one year, I think it was the second year of my mission, 3 or 4 people in our home branch were baptized, which doesn't happen very often. We live in the middle of you know, middle of nowhere in Illinois, and there's not a whole lot of people to begin with, let alone people that are interested in the gospel. The branch, when we moved there, only had 14 people, and so you know, 4 baptisms was a pretty large number, almost increased the size of the branch by a lot. I mean, that was a lot of people for the percentage of the population. And so it's just amazing to me how much success and how much happiness and joy can be had when you really do take the time to get involved in the missionary work. And it's hard to have that perspective beforehand, you know, because you just don't really understand how important you really are to the missionary work. At least in my case, I always thought that the bulk of the missionary work was done by the missionaries themselves and not by the members. And it wasn't until on my mission that I realized how much more effective the members are at being missionaries, simply because they already know the people, they have the people's trust, and they really love the people, and the people know that they love them. And so there's just so many barriers that have already been crossed and broken down right there, that that the members really have the biggest and best opportunity to do the missionary work far more effectively than the missionaries themselves do, and in a way that will bring a greater and more lasting change in the lives of those people that they teach. For one thing, because we all know that if a convert becomes to rely on the missionaries that taught them, and don't really establish other foundations within the area that they're at, other social foundations or supportive foundations within the area that they're at, then when the missionaries leave or are transferred, then it makes it very difficult for them to keep going in the difficult times. And that problem is totally resolved by the members getting involved in the work, because they are the support for the members, for the new converts, and they can be there at any time for them, and just be a solid example for them, and just be a constant source of love for those people, and to share the love of Jesus Christ with them. And so it's just incredibly important that the members get involved beforehand. And so that apart from even preparing for a mission, but just doing the missionary work itself, I think that's an extremely crucial issue. So this was actually in the same area as the last one, which is interesting because it was one of the areas that we found the most difficult to find people to teach in, and it also happened to be the area in where I think some of the most miraculous experiences I ever had took place. In this experience, my companion and I were walking down the street, and we saw a family in the distance, and we walked up to them and introduced ourselves, and we hadn't even gotten even done introducing ourselves. We just said, you know, we're representatives of Jesus Christ from the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and he just put his hand up and said, I don't want to hear it, thank you, and just walked off. Just like walked off with his family. And you know, that happens a lot, so you know, I didn't really think much of it, but we just kept working just kept doing missionary work throughout the week. And then about a week and a half or 2 later, we were visiting a neighborhood out in the middle of nowhere. We had an appointment with somebody to go teach them out there. And it was a developing neighborhood. They had just been building the houses there, and so there was hardly anybody that lived there at all. Most of it was just deserted. There was maybe like 4 or 5 houses out of 50 that were occupied, and so we'd gone out there to visit this family, and we knocked on their door, and they weren't home. And since it had taken us so long to get out there, we wanted to not waste the time just traveling back and forth between these really distant areas. And so we decided to see if there's anybody else we could teach or visit in the area. And so we knew that there was a member family who had not been to church in a while and that we hadn't seen for a while, and that we knew had been going through a hard time. And so we went to go visit them. And we go up to their door and knock on it, and again there was no answer. And we looked around at all the houses nearby, and there was like hardly any cars or houses that even looked occupied. And so we didn't really think it was worth our time to continue working in that area, to be knocking doors. And there was nobody on the streets or within sight that we could see. And so we decided to go back to the main section of town and continue working there. And so we turned around from the doorstep and started walking away. And I'd gotten about to the end of the walkway of the house when this powerful feeling of kind of an anxiousness hit me. And I just stopped because it was so sudden and so powerful, and it felt like there was something I was forgetting to do. But I racked my brain and I checked my agenda. There was nothing in that area that we had to do, and so I thought, that's weird. I must just be a figment of my imagination. So I started walking forward again, and again this feeling hit me, this intense anxiousness that there was something I needed to do. And so I look around, seeing what there was I could possibly need to do there, and I see that, and I just, as I'm glancing around, my eyes cross this door, and I just get this feeling, go knock that door. As my eyes just like stopped, riveted on that door, and I just had this feeling, this impression to go knock the door. And so my companion's staring at me as I suddenly stop, and I'm staring around and staring at doors. And he said, "What's wrong, Elder?" And I said, "I don't know." And so I take off and I start walking towards this door. And I go up to the house, and my companion runs to catch up to me. He's like, "What are we doing, Elder?" And I said, "I don't know." And so I walk up to the door, and I knock on the door, and he says, "Who lives here?" And I said, again, "I don't know. I have no idea." And I was halfway expecting there to not be anybody home, because again, this entire neighborhood was pretty much deserted. And but to my surprise, within a few seconds, the door opens, and a man opens the door, and he spots us, and he says, "Oh, it's you. I've been waiting for you. Come in." And so my companion and I would just glance at each other, totally shocked and surprised, having no idea what's going on. We walk into the house, and we sit down, and as we're chatting with the man, he's chatting with us totally naturally, as if we know each other already. And as I'm chatting with him, I'm starting, recognition starts to dawn on me that this was the man who had blown us off, several weeks earlier. And I was astounded at one thing by the change, but again at how we had come to find him. And he said, "How did you guys know to come knock here?" I basically just said, I had no idea anybody lived here, and I just kind of explained to him what I just told you about why I knocked his door, and I said, "Is there a reason why we're here? Was there a reason we were supposed to come?" And then he said, "The day I blew you guys off, I just kind of did it out of reflex, because there's a lot of preachers. But then after you guys left, I started thinking about it, and I just felt, that I needed to talk with you." So I resolved the next time I saw you, I was going to, ask you guys to come over. And I saw you guys once as I was walking out of Walmart. I saw you guys several blocks down the road. And so I yelled and called out to you, but you were so far away you didn't hear me, so you just kept walking. And he said, but I wasn't worried, even though I couldn't get a hold of you that time. I thought to myself, if God really wants these people to come to my house, they will find my house. And here you guys are. And as he continued explaining, he said, "It's actually pretty miraculous that you found me at all, because I work in another city, and so I usually have to leave like 5 or 6 in the morning, and I don't get back until extremely late because I play in a band on the side, and we usually play at clubs, every night. And so I'm not home until very late. So I'm usually working right now. But I came home, I took work off just for 2 hours today to come home and see my daughter, who's going to be singing in a performance in about an hour or so. And I came home to get a little bit of a snack and lunch before I went over. And so this is the only time I have ever been home during the day in probably, several months. And so it's actually a miracle that you found me. And once we started teaching him, and he liked the lesson so much that he invited us back to teach the rest of his family, and we continued to teach the family for a while. They were a great family, and that experience just taught me again that the Lord really does exist, that miracles do exist, and that He's very aware of His children and their needs, and He can answer our prayers, and he will answer our prayers, even if that answer is through the action of others. And that was just an extreme fortification to my own testimony. One more thing that the MTC helped me prepare for my mission was through seeking to recognize and receive personal revelation. When I first got into the MTC, I was called as a district leader, and being a district leader in the MTC is nothing like being a district leader in the field, really. But it is alike in one way, in that you're responsible for the people in your district and to help them progress and to help take care of them, kind of like a shepherd towards them. And so, as you're responsible for all these missionaries, and you're a 19 or 18-year-old kid, you really have no idea a lot of times how to help them. And so you have to recur to the Spirit and to revelation a lot, or at least I had to a lot, in order to find out how to help my missionaries. And so that put me in a place where I was obligated to rely very, very heavily upon the Spirit and revelation in order to fulfill my responsibilities. And so I think that applies a lot to every missionary, because as missionaries, we are shepherds to the people in our area. We're responsible for each one of them and for helping them progress and head towards salvation, in the same way that a district leader is responsible for his or her missionaries. And so I think it's important for every missionary to take the time beforehand, or before the MTC, or in the MTC, or whenever. It's never really too late to strive to really seek to find that revelation in order to know how to help the people they're serving and the people they're dealing with, and also in order to understand how to overcome their own personal challenges in being a missionary. And I think that once you can do that, that gives you one of the biggest tools, one of the most important tools that you can have for being a successful and effective missionary in the field. Before I served a mission, I read the scriptures pretty much every day, quite a decent amount every day. During seminary years especially, but I never really read it with somebody in mind, or with a purpose in mind, or with questions in mind, or with difficulties in mind, until I was on the mission and I was thinking about all these people that we were teaching who were struggling with a lot of different things and going through hard times. And that's whenever I really started to think, how does this scripture apply to real life, and how does this scripture help these people solve their problems? And that was probably the biggest and most important aspect of learning in the mission, and also the one that took the longest and was the hardest, I think, just because it requires so much consistent effort and thought and experience outside of your own in order to do that. And so I think any experience you can gain with that before the mission would help a lot. Just as you try to teach people, and as you try to help people in your life before the mission, and think about them as you're reading the scriptures with the intent of finding things that will help them in their lives. That's a huge way to help prepare for that, I think. One I can think of was something that taught me never to really to judge the conditions of a person's soul. We were walking down a street in an area that was very difficult. We were having a hard time finding anybody to teach in that area, and we walked up to a man and his family and introduced ourselves and explained that we were missionaries, that we wanted to share a message with him about Jesus Christ. And we kind of gave a quick little introduction to our message, and then asked if we could stop by his house later to share the message with him and his family. And it was him, his mother, and then his niece, I believe, who we met that day. And he said, "You guys can come by and teach me, but I want you to know I will never get baptized in your church." And I said, "Okay." I was kind of taken aback, and I was like, "Oh wow, that was direct." And so I thought, maybe it wouldn't be such a good idea to go and teach him then, if we were just going to be wasting his time, and our time, and if it wasn't really going to be something that he wanted to do. And I said, well, maybe we could. And I think I also, we invited him. I think we invited him to church as well. And whenever he didn't really act too interested in that, we said, well, if you're ever interested, just come by church, And he said, no, I want you guys to come over. I'll listen to your message. And we said, okay. So we scheduled an appointment, went to his house, and the first time we came in there, I was very apprehensive, especially after the little greeting we'd gotten. And when we sat down, he said, "I've heard a lot about your guys' church. I've heard a lot of different interesting stories." And so he sat us down, basically, and just grilled us with a bunch of different questions. And as missionaries, we wanted to teach him, the focal message that Jesus Christ is called a prophet today, and reestablished his church, and that could help him and his family. But instead, we just kind of had this question and answer session that lasted for at least an hour, where he just grilled us with question after question after question. And he responded with all the typical, rumors and stories that people hear about the Mormon Church. And so we answered all his questions and resolved a lot of his concerns. And afterwards, he's like, "Wow, that was really interesting. You guys are not at all what I expected, And then we said, "Yeah, well, if you ever get interested, come to church." He's like, "Yeah, I'm going to church this Sunday." And I was like, "Whoa, okay." And that took me back. That took me a little bit by surprise. And we said, okay, well, before you come to church, is it okay if we come by and teach you, another message? We had a message that we would like to share with you. And he said, yeah, that's fine. Come by another day. And so we set an appointment with him. I believe it was Thursday or Friday, and went back to his house after answering his questions. And we taught him the lesson about the restoration of the gospel, and about the Book of Mormon, and about the prophet Joseph Smith and the Church of Jesus Christ and how it was restored. And afterwards he said, everybody says their church is true. How can I possibly know that any of what you've told me is true? And we explained to him, what the scriptures tell about that, and about how you can ask God and pray for a knowledge of the truth of things pertaining to a spiritual nature. And so we invited him to read the Book of Mormon and to pray and ask God if the Book of Mormon really was true, and if the prophet Joseph Smith really was in fact called of God to do his work. And he struggled with it a lot. He said he couldn't believe that God would really answer his prayers and let him know, whether if it was just because he didn't think he was righteous enough, or if he didn't believe God really still did miracles in these days, or whatever the reason was. He just had a really, really hard time believing it. And he said, there's got to be another way to know. And we said, not really, because any other way to know could be disproved by some other fact of the same nature. If we try to convince you with logic, then there's going to be another logical argument that could unconvince you. And so really the only way to know for sure is by asking of God and letting the Holy Spirit tell you if it's true or not. And when we told him that, he was very depressed, because we could tell that he really wanted to know if these things were true, because if they were true, it meant a lot to him, and he wanted to seek after it. But if not, then he didn't want to just be wasting his time. And so he became very, very sullen when he realized that was the only way he could know. And he said, well, we'll see then. And we finished the lesson and left the house, very, very disappointed, thinking that he just didn't have enough faith to really even believe he could know or even get an answer, and just not really expecting him to continue with it, because his doubts would prevent him from continuing. And so as we left the house, we said, if you're still interested, and we're at the church, come whenever you want. And he said, yeah, I'm coming. Well, I'll go to church. And we said, oh, okay. He said, I still want to go to church. And so we set an appointment to come by and pick him up the Sunday morning. And a lot of people, Sunday, it's pretty early to go to church on Sunday morning, and it's a weekend, so most people will sleep in. So when we came to pick him up on Sunday, I was not really expecting him to be there at all, not even expecting him to be awake. But we had not even gotten to the door yet when he walks out dressed in a full-on suit, three-piece suit, dressed up, all nice looking, and he was even bringing some of his family members with him, and totally took me aback again. He came to church, and he was enjoying himself, having a great old time, paying attention to all the classes and participating. And in the very last hour, we were in priesthood meeting, and the lesson was about the Holy Ghost. And I thought, oh, this is perfect. I was going to teach him more about how he can receive an answer and receive revelation. And he was, participating a lot, asking a lot of questions, and providing a lot of input. And at the very end of the lesson, the teacher finished, and he said, "Is there anything else that anybody wants to share about the Holy Ghost or about receiving revelation?" And he rose his hand, and I said, "Oh, that's interesting. What's he going to say?" And he stands up, and I was kind of apprehensive. I was very self-conscious, as a missionary, and especially at that age. And so when he stand up, I was a little bit worried. And he starts off and he says, I studied for many years with the Jehovah's Witnesses and with many other churches, and had not really come to a conclusion about what was true, or what I really wanted to pursue, religiously speaking. And then these two young boys come to my house and hand me this book. He waves the Book of Mormon around. He says, and told me to read it and pray if it was true, and that I could know if there was a prophet on earth today. And he kind of said it very dismissively. And he said, and so I did it, and I prayed, and as I said, I knelt down and asked Heavenly Father if the Book of Mormon was true and if Joseph Smith was a prophet. He said, I don't know if this was the Holy Ghost or not, but this overwhelming power, this overwhelming feeling of peace overcame me, and an assurance about what these young boys were teaching me. And it was so powerful and so inspiring to me that tears came to my eyes, and I could not stop crying for nearly an hour. And this man was a Marine, and not by any means a sensitive character. He'd been through a lot in his life and lived a very colorful past. And he said, I bawled like a child for an hour because of how special this was and how important it was to me. And he said, so I don't really know if that was revelation or not, but I've decided to get baptized. And that was an incredible experience. It just took me totally off guard. Had no idea that had happened the night after we had taught him. And it just taught me again that you can never really know who the golden investigators are, or who the prepared children of God are to hear the message. And also, again, it just re-emphasized for me the truth of the promises in the Scriptures. That if you want to know if something is true, you really can ask God in faith, and He really can let you know the truth of all things. And that's especially true when it comes to matters that are spiritual. And so I just want to invite everybody again, if they haven't done so for themselves, to read the Book of Mormon and find out for themselves if it is true, and to pray to Heavenly Father and ask Him, because I know through my own experience and through the experiences of people I taught on my mission that is a definite and real possibility. So for all of you who do get a call to the Mexico City East Mission, or any Mexico City mission for that matter, but especially the Mexico City East Mission, I would say if there's any advice I could give you, it would just be to have faith in yourself and to have faith in the commandments of God. And what I mean by that is to believe that you really can change and become the kind of person that you want to be and that God wants you to be. There's no reason why any one of us cannot become a heroic missionary like Ammon or Alma or Paul or Peter or any one of those other great missionaries or prophets from the Scriptures. We all have God-like potential to become even more like our Heavenly Father, and even more like those men who are good examples of doing that. And so I want to assure you that no matter where you are at in your life right now, it is always possible to become even better and to become the hero that you want to be. And at that same time, I want you to have faith in the commandments of God and His atonement. One of the most important lessons I learned on my mission in Mexico City was how important it is to remember that God is all-knowing and all-powerful, and therefore He knows exactly what will be the best for us, and that's what He tells us to do. And so if God is ever telling us to do something, either through a rule or a commandment, or through an inspiration or revelation, it's because He knows that is the absolute best, that action will give us the absolute best outcome that we can possibly receive. And so no matter how hard it seems or how illogical it seems sometimes, I urge you to always, always, always err on the side of obedience to Heavenly Father. And remember that your loyalties are first to God and then to everyone else. And what I mean by that is there will be times on your mission where there will be other missionaries or other members or other people who are supposed to be obeying the commandments, but who are not being the best examples that the great examples that they should be, and will be encouraging you to be disobedient. And there's often a temptation that through your loyalty to them, you might want to submit to those temptations and enticements and be disobedient. But remember that Heavenly Father is the most important individual in our relationships, and that we should first and foremost maintain our relationship with Him, and then worry about the other people. And if we do it in that way, then through obeying and strengthening our relationship with Heavenly Father, He will help all of our other relationships to be the best that they possibly can be, and to help our lives to achieve the best possible outcomes that will help us be happy. And so that's one piece of advice I want to give you. And just remember to be humble always, and to take the advice that you're given from others and really take it to heart, and not be worried about what other people think about you, but rather what Heavenly Father thinks about you. And what Heavenly Father thinks about you is that He always loves you no matter what you will do, but He wants you to be even happier. And the way to do that is by doing the things that He has asked you to do. And so Heavenly Father wants you to take the advice of other people and to become better and stronger, as long as it is good and true advice. And I just want to share my testimony with you that I know without any shadow of a doubt that the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints is the restored Church of Jesus Christ on this earth, and that it was done so through the prophet Joseph Smith, and that the Book of Mormon really is a true book of God and of Holy Scripture that has been given to us by Him through His prophets and angels, and that it is through the Book of Mormon and the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints that a person can come to be the happiest that they can possibly be in this life and achieve the greatest blessings and happiness in the life hereafter as well. And I know that for many reasons. One, because of my own personal experience in having lived through both sides of both sides of life, either not living the gospel or living the gospel, for finding my own testimony through the Spirit and seeing other people's do that, seeing other people in their lives achieve that testimony, and as well as just my physical experience in this life of doing what Heavenly Father asked me to do and doing what He does not want me to do, and seeing the consequences and the feelings and happiness that come as a result of either one of those. And I say these things in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.